Welcome in, everyone, to Flyover Footy. My name is Matt Baker, joined by my friend in soccer, Santiago Beltran, for another fallout look at a City match. And it's a draw that feels like a win, right, Santi?
Yeah, like came in a stoppage time when we were all thinking, okay, another loss, and it's not a good start for this streak of away games. But hey, the team rescued a point. They went for it, understood that losing to nothing was the same as losing 1-0. So
Hmm?
kudos to the guys.
I like that. They felt like losing 2-0 was the same as losing 1-0, so they didn't give up. That's a good way to put it. And they fought for it at the very end. I loved what we saw, the sub work. I love that we saw just the never give up attitude. And it's the second match in a row where we've kind of seen this.
Yeah,
We ended up getting an equalizer earlier in the last game, but at the same time, we're starting to see after 6 games the resolve that this Yohan Damet team has, that the mentality that they have carrying into whenever something doesn't go right or doesn't go according to plan, they fight back. And it's kind of an intangible aspect of this where there's not really a stat that backs up, oh, they started to be on fire after after this moment in the game, or after allowing the goal, then they started really turning up the heat against NYCFC. The stats don't really back that up, but at the same time, as the game progresses, you can clearly see the subs that come in, the tactics that they were looking at in the final moments of the game. It all added up that City was not backing down. They were trying different things, it seemed, towards the end, noticeably looking for crossing at the end, trying to be a little more creative in just throwing chaos into NYCFC's bunkered back line, and it ended up working out. And now we have a point to talk about. And we'll go with the pod in a second, but you and I were talking pregame about how many points, you asked, how many points would we want to see in these next handful of games? And I think this match with this result starts that off and almost buys us a little bit of time and goodwill to reach some of the point totals that we were hoping to see over these next couple of games.
definitely. It's a good start for this stretch of away games. Out of the next 5, City only has 1 home game. So yeah, it's good to start with a draw and build some confidence from here, especially going to Dallas, which is a place where City hasn't had good luck.
No, they have not. And Dallas had some pretty good luck on their side this weekend, that's for sure. So, Santi, let's get into the pod recording. How about it?
Let's do it.
All right. Welcome, everyone, to Flyover Footy. My name is Matt Baker, joined by my friend in soccer, Santiago Beltran, for a fallout look at this latest City match. Match day 6 is in the books, and it's a 1-1 draw against NYCFC. And if we sound a little excited for this 1-1 draw, I think it's because we are. It's a draw that feels like a win. Santi, first thoughts on this game. Does it actually feel like a win to you at this point?
No, not a win, but happy the guys found the equalizer at the end and rescued a point, and also happy the team got its first result playing away, first goal. I got to call a goal, so I was happy at the end.
Calling a goal at the end always makes it better, and it's the taste you have left in your mouth that you want going after a game like this. Santi, we are recording this on Easter Sunday, so happy Easter to all who celebrate. And it might end up being an abbreviated show as a result, but let's dive right into it. Let's not waste any time and get going on our starting 11, because there is some talk before we get into the excitement of the McSorley goal. There is some talk about the starting 11 and some, I would say, some anxiety that was building pre-game and what took place with some of the announcements. But when all was said and done, the starting 11 looked very, very similar to what we had been seeing in the first 5 games. Roman Berkey was in net. Dante Polvera, Timo Baumgartel, and Haziel Roscoe were our 3 center backs. Rafael Santos was our left wing back. Conrad Vallum was our right wing back. Chris Durkin and Daniel Edelman were our central midfielders. Marcel Hartl, Sergio Cordova, and Simon Betcher were our front 3. It was listed as a 4-3-3 on Apple's broadcast, and at times it definitely seemed that way. So some notables in this 11. Sergio Cordova's first start of 2026. We finally got what we asked for in seeing an extended look at Cordova. That was great. You had some pre-game hubbub when Colin Welsh, the City 2 goalkeeper, was announced as having a short-term loan. It was City's first short-term loan of the season. This ended up, best we know, due to Roman Berkey's potential unavailability due to a shoulder issue, nagging from the previous match against the Revs, and it was one of those you wonder what's going on. Roman Berkey with the shoulder injury, he had been training in full, so you didn't really think that was a concern. There was some speculation based on Ben Lunt's impending childbirth that maybe that was a reason. Maybe Lunt got called back. That ended up not being the case. And so Berkey was able to go, and Colin Welsh wasn't even on the match day roster. And so you have this just in case emergency situation that ended up being nothing. But other than that, same 10 out of 11 that we had been seeing previously. It's just that right 10 position that continues to elude St. Louis on how to maximize that spot in the lineup the most. When you have a handful of players that you're wanting to see that maybe are returning from fitness. We'll talk about all of them in a second. But on the bench, you had a couple other interesting notables. The bench for St. Louis in this game, Cedric Toyshirt, Brendan McSorley, Makai Joyner, Sang Bin Zhang, Thomas Totlin, Miguel Perez, Lucas McNaughton, Mamadou Mbake, and Ben Lunt. No Falou Fall, no Tomas Ostrak. For Ostrak, Santi, to me, this might be a fitness thing. Ostrak has only been training in full with the team for week and a half, 2 weeks or so. And so there might be, continuing to inch his way along. He hasn't seen time with City 2. So, that's been a thing so far where as you're getting back from fitness from a long-term injury and you just have a couple weeks under your belt, maybe you get some time with City 2. But Falou Fall has had time with City 2. This was more notable to me in his lack of even making the matchday roster. So with all of that said, take it wherever you want to, Santi. What caught your eye the most, either in the starting 11 or who's on our bench?
Yeah, so I'm gonna start with the bench. Ostrak, as you said, I think it's just the timing, getting back in it. I'm sure he will see, or I think he will see time with CD2 next week. It's too bad that they were off this weekend. Otherwise, I think he will have seen time there. Mm-hmm. And Falou Fall, I think it just goes back to, at least to me, it just goes back to what Joan Damet has said. Like, you have to earn your spot in training and also game performances. And maybe the answer there is Lucas McNaughton, and he had a great game last night. So right now, maybe he's an inch ahead of Falou Fall, especially because Fall was injured and missed some time in training camp, and he's just getting back into it. But I think Damet is being consistent with what he says. I think the fact that Falou Fall, the team spent a lot of money to get him, I don't think Damet and his staff are thinking about that. It's more like, what are the other players doing? Are they performing? And he has to earn that spot.
That's a big notable that folks need to remember when it comes to guessing why some of these players aren't seeing minutes. Mamadou Mbake and Falou Fall are the two front and center. Sergio Cordova, even to an extent. But just because a regime leadership like Corey Ray, Diego Gigliani, just because they bring in a player doesn't mean they're automatically slotted in to start. I alluded to this a little bit with Stu on our preview pod when we were talking about whether or not Falou would be a starting candidate for this game, or Mbake would actually finally see some more minutes. And it boils down to how the head coach is seeing players in training and the profiles that he thinks will best suit the players on the field, not the expectations that come in when you bring in a new player, you sign them, no matter what you pay for them. And I think that has to be a little reassuring in some ways to fans, as much as there might be a little frustration with not playing an Mbake or not playing a Falou Fall because of what we've seen from Falou in the past, especially last season. We know what qualities he offers. He offers the left-footed left center back, which is a different profile and can benefit St. Louis in some significant ways. But at the same time, if you're seeing what you need to see from a Dante Polvera, a Haziel Orozco, and a Timo Baumgartel, then it's their spots to lose. And you would be doing a disservice in some ways if you would just be assuming and expecting that another player comes in and no matter how well you perform, automatically gets the spot. I don't think St. Louis is a team that has that luxury where we have players outside of maybe Marcel Hartl, Edu Leuven, and Roman Berkey, who are out and out, no-brainer starters. If they're healthy, if they're fit, then they're in the lineup. That's part of what this whole roster reconstruction is dealing with. And we saw it, I think, on display last night for that. And no, don't forget too, Lucas McNaughton. Don't sleep on Lucas McNaughton, because the only factor to me in Lucas McNaughton's questionable quality this year was the fact that he had a serious injury a couple of years ago that he really hasn't shown the same quality post-injury that he did pre. He was with, what was it, Nashville and then DC United, I think it was. And he never really had he was always stop and start with DC last year when he was with them. He never had an opportunity to get a consistent run multiple games in a row. He was always on the availability report with that nagging injury. But by all accounts, he seems pretty healthy at this point, healthy enough to at least make these kinds of appearances. And his quality in what he can offer, both in defense, in transition, and on the ball with this kind of touch at the end of the game, was pretty proof that he has that kind of quality that you want to have in your lineup and you want to have available. So as of right now, he is our fourth center back option.
Yeah, and the other thing, if you think, okay, let's bring Falou Fall, then if you look at your bench, you have to make a decision on who doesn't make that gave them roster two, and just based on what's going on, Leuven not being available, obviously you need somebody like Miguel Perez to have somebody at the center mid in case you need somebody, and he came in last night. So it's a lot of decisions that you have to make. If you want to have Falou Fall on the bench and maybe he won't even play, but you have other players that you can use during the game, it's part of the decision making. And back to the starting 11, I was a little bit surprised to see Cordova. Wasn't surprised because he came in last game, but I still don't think that's his position.
Well, let's talk about our 3-word reviews that Stu had posted, because there's some interesting ones before we get into Cordova's positioning, because we will get into Cordova's positioning. I posted from the Flyover account McNaughton, McSorley, McPoint. And that
nice. Good one.
I was inspired by Phil's alliteration earlier in the night with Cordova over whoever it was, Cordova over Toy Shirt or something like that in the starting 11. Anyway, stole that point. Love road points. McSorley should start from Scott Kendrick. Sub earlier, please. The notable thing on the sub earlier, please comment to me is that Damet kind of did sub earlier than he usually does.
He did, but people weren't happy about the sub choice.
No,
at least from what I saw.
Yeah, I mean, in most games, I would say Durkin going out would be due to a yellow card, for instance.
Right.
I don't know. I have no reason to believe yet that he's hurt at all. But the goal sequence, Durkin went down pretty hard, it seemed.
Yeah.
Now, this was about 15 minutes later, so it's always possible that Durkin had a good go and Damet saw something, the staff saw something, and they just didn't see the same Durkin after he was hit by Hannes Wolf versus before. That could play into it. We'll find out more about that this week if that's a factor. But in the end, I didn't not like Miguel Perez in this game. So I think that at face value, you can question it, and you're definitely wondering because Durkin has not gone out that early yet thus far. But in general, I thought it was definitely an interesting sub choice. Maybe get some fresh legs in the midfield based on what NYCFC was doing. And at that point, you're down a goal. So maybe they liked what profile Perez offered, who has some attacking midfield experience with City for better or for worse. We'll find out maybe as things shake out with Durkin, some background on that. But we had more comments, stole that point. Subs were strong. East is weak. East is weak is an interesting comment. What a point. Play the kid, a good result. No more Vollum. USL quality pitch.
Yes.
Start the younglings. Survived Edelman's follies. I noted a couple times in the first half that
he had a rough game.
It was definitely not his follow-up to the Revs performance that I think Edelman wanted. Did not have an issue with Edelman getting subbed out when he did. And I thought Polvera did a decent job at defensive midfield.
That was good to see.
First time we saw Dante Polvera in his arguably more natural position, at least of his recent history, moving up to the midfield. A lot of comments about play the kids. Half of the comments, lousy till late, boring goal. Another bad game. Lots more play the kids. Commitment to mediocrity. Various comments about some players here and there. Cordova, Betcher, and so on. So I would say a lot of 90% frustration with how the team ended up looking for those huge swaths, and then the excitement late saved it. And ultimately, when that kind of thing happens, Santi, you're going to get a lot of comments about changing up the starting 11, playing the players who succeeded when it came down to it at the end. And I have this on my my good, bad, and ugly, where just starting right off of some of the good things before we look at some of the positioning and the stats of it all. When City was fighting towards the end, they had their subs in, right? They had Cedric Choyshirt, they had Miguel Perez, you had Lucas McNaughton, Mackay Joyner, and who's the sub I'm forgetting, Santi? Brendan McSorley. Brendan McSorley.
Yep.
So you have those subs in at a game state that is vastly different than the beginning of the game. This is my only caveat, I think, when it comes to trying to judge the players who were ending the game and the fight that they showed and the ability to come back and actually steal a point. Judging that based on who should start a game is a little more tricky, a little more nuanced than that, where not only the specific tactics that they were asked to employ, which at the very end of the game definitely seemed to me like we were trying to get a cross in the box. We were trying to load up the box. We were trying to make something happen on a modified set piece scenario, as opposed to trying to break down NYCFC's low block that they had dropped into. They were dropping a lot of players into the box, 6-7 players into the box. No pun intended on that one. But what St. Louis was doing late, especially with that goal, saw Lucas McNaughton have the ball up in the air, but at the same time, it was Connor Vollum over on the left wingback side.
Mm-hmm.
They were looking to leverage one of their feet to get the ball into the box, and clearly loading up the box for that opportunity. That kind of a mindset, those kind of tactics late in the game cannot be extended for analysis to the very beginning of the game in an even game state when both teams are looking to get that advantage. That's my big caveat when it comes to judging the subs when it versus maybe adding one of them to the starting lineup, saying McSorley or Joyner or McNaughton or anybody of that caliber should start. Not saying that it's not worth, the conversation is not worth having, but their performances here and what they were asked to do doesn't translate to a beginning of the game scenario, at least in my book.
Yeah, definitely. First, a small sample size, and second, yeah, it's the end of the game. Basically, tactics got out the window at that point, and you're just trying to go with the equalizer. But yeah, some players may deserve a longer look. Maybe we'll see them in future games starting. I mean, coming in the second half or starting in Open Cup. But yeah, based on the game situation, the players that came in, I think they did really well, and the team got the point that was looking for. And if you had told me that you were gonna end the game with McSorley, Joyner, Miguel Perez, I would have not had that in my bingo card.
No, did not see that one coming. You could, and honestly, most of our players were healthy, and we had a full roster going in. So with that being our next folks up, obviously you don't have Leuven and Ostrak, and our central midfield is probably the biggest question as far as depth goes that allows a guy like Miggy Perez to see minutes. I like Colin's comment, no tactic zone at the end of the game. And that's Matt Doyle's go-to.
Yep.
These last 20 minutes are more chaotic in that manner. So I think I like your perspective on this, that if anything, you could argue these players are cementing themselves as the go-tos when it comes to this 60, 70th minute need to bring in subs and have this kind of a look, this scrappy look to end a game. The scrappiness is another part of what I thought was fantastic about how this game ended. City picked up their first road point of the season and has their first back-to-back matches with points of the season. Santi, I went back and looked in 2025 to see, because it didn't feel like this mindset, this mentality existed last season with City, the ability to come from behind. And it largely didn't. So 2 games in a row after 6 of us coming from behind to earn a point, 4 in total these last 2. City did this only 2 times all of last season.
Wow.
Their ability to come from behind at any game state to take at least a point. It happened in a 3-3 draw against the LA Galaxy on June 14th, where we were down 3-2. That was our game state, and Klaus scored a goal in stoppage to steal a draw, and then a 2-1 win over Portland, where Portland had scored first. Those are the only two times in June and July, all of last season, that we were down and managed to come back to take at least a point. And we've done it already 2 times through 6 matches. So you could absolutely, and you should argue that being down multiple times in 6 matches, not a great way to start.
No.
And there are problems that need addressed based off of this, namely in the attack that we'll get to. But the fact is that when your team finds themselves down, you need to be able to find equalizers. You need to find a way back in a game. And City is showing that they can replicate this, that this is a consistent thing that the team knows that they're capable of. And honestly, Santi, I feel that's always half the battle, is knowing you're capable of this, being able to point back to previous matches and say, we've done this before, we can do it again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And it's good to see the team has been able to do it back-to-back games. Obviously, you don't want to be in that situation, but seeing that the team is able to find solutions and find a way to equalize the game, and in last game's case, to go for the win, is great. And Damet said it on the press conference, like, yeah, when you go down 1-0, you're trying to stay in the game. If the other team scores too early, like, then basically the game is out of the window. So City did a good job trying to stay in the game and then going for it in the last 15 minutes.
Damet's comments on the comeback were, yeah, I don't think it's going to flip the season. I think it's just part of the process. Of course, you want to build on moments. I think this is a very good moment to build on in terms of getting a point on the road, especially in the fashion we did today. So it's good. Really pleased for the guys again. The commitment tonight of the group, the mindset to keep pushing and to go earn that point on the road was massive. And it's really nice, Santi, as a fan of City, to hear a coach say this and to have it be true. Not to say, we have to be fighting until the end. We have to keep seeking that out. I thought the boys played really strong. They just couldn't pull it off tonight. This is such a better feeling to have a coach say he's proud of what they were able to do versus all of the underlying things that they might have been doing right, but they couldn't quite get the job done. Absolutely great to see. The last really good thing that I came away from this game with is our overall defense. When we're able to take points, it's much nicer to be able to look at the defense and say and wax poetic about the things that they were doing, as opposed to last season early on when, we were happy and proud of our defense, but our offense was legitimately non-existent. Couldn't buy a goal, couldn't do anything for weeks on end. In the first 6 games, and this is where the underlying metrics, you have to toss in some caveats. Different sites have different XG models.
Yeah.
And so things are slightly different overall. By and large, if you look at places like FotMob or SofaScore or Opta's data, by and large, it's pretty consistent. Like, you might have small differences here and there. Maybe it's a 0.8 versus a 0.95 XG kind of a thing. So there are some slight differences, but in the 3 different models that I looked at over the first 6 games, City has now kept all opponents so far to an XG of 1.55 or lower. In this game, NYCFC had about 1.17, maybe 1.25, depending on your site used. But overall, everything's been less than 1.55 in this first 6 games. It was even the Revs that had this. And that speaks, I think, to the consistency that St. Louis has been able to have in what their defense is doing. And we talked, Justin and I, on our first 5-game recap, we talked about how most of the goals early on have come from these little individual moments. Maybe it's an Edelman stepping up when he shouldn't have. Maybe it's a Polvera out of position. Maybe it's some other transition moment. But when the defense gets set, they've been very solid. And they were solid again in this match. It had nothing to do with a set defense. It was a transition goal with, again, Polvera making a choice and not really succeeding in a challenge. And so that's noteworthy. That's a takeaway. But at the same time, overall, this defense has, again, through this match against NYCFC, proven that they are more than capable to keep City in every single match that we've been in.
And that could be the answer why Falu Fall and Mbake Fall haven't seen the field or the game day lineup yet.
I think it has to be the biggest flag, whether you call it a green flag or a red flag. This is the reason, by and large, I would say, I agree, that you haven't seen Mbake, you haven't seen Falu. You haven't seen anybody else take over the spots for Pulvera, Baumgartel, and Orozco. And it will happen eventually, whether it's the Open Cup here in a couple weeks or otherwise. It'll happen that we see a different look on our back line. Injuries might occur. You might need to give some guys minutes of rest, especially after the World Cup break. But the only things that I think you can point to with our back line are those moments in transition where a guy like Pulvera is just not making the challenge he needs to, or he doesn't need to be making those challenges and he needs to have a different first instinct and mindset. He's still growing into the center back role. He's got these tendencies. That's part of the game. But the other side of the back line that I've seen folks point to are their offensive characteristics, their ability to lead the possession from the back line. Playing it out of the back is different with Falufal versus Dante Pulvera. We know that. And is there something that you need to change on the back line that would better set us up for success in the attack? And the reason, Santi, that I struggle with diving too deep into that mindset is some of the bad things. This is my transition into some of the bad things, is the fact that we can get the ball into the final third pretty well, pretty regularly. I don't have necessarily an issue with our ability to get the ball into the final third. It's what we do when we get the ball into the final third that is pretty much the problem. And I don't want to jump too far ahead into our stats, but you can see that we had plenty of chances to get the ball in the final third, passes in the final third and into the box, touches in the opposition box. We actually ended the game with more, in the second half especially, with more passes in the final third and touches in the opposition box. And overall in the game, we had more passes into the opposition box than NYCFC. We hung tight with getting the ball into these advanced positions. We hung tight with getting the ball into where we should be able to create a lot of these chances on goal. But when we get into the final third, we continue to be a little anemic in our offense, from the crosses to the blocked shots, the inability to really separate and create space once we're in the final third. So pulling it back to our center backs, I'm not exactly concerned with our ability, or with the center back's ability to get the ball where it needs to be. It's happening. It's just once we get it into that next phase, into the second or third line up, we're really struggling with this, Santi.
Yeah, it's been a struggle to create chances, but yeah, the team moves the ball really well, makes it into a final third with no issue, but it's just creating the chances, or even when there are chances or have chances, closing those chances. But yeah, I think the defense continues performing. It's just a lot of things in the attack need to be improved. One thing I also, since we're talking about the things we didn't like, I didn't like the way we handled the corner kicks. It was always a short pass from Hartel to Betcher, and then Betcher back to Hartel, and maybe New York City FC didn't jump or didn't do what City thought they were going to do, but nothing happened there.
Do you think that's a result of the ineffectiveness of our set pieces in previous games, especially from Marcel Hartel, where you had Santos, Rafa Santos had a great corner kick to Durkin against the Revs, but other than that one, I would classify a lot of our corner kicks just similar to our crossing, where it's been extremely ineffective. And so do you think this might have been a change in strategy based off of that?
Yeah, it could have been an adjustment to that, but again, nothing happened. So I don't know if New York City just didn't jump or was ready for what City was going to present, but we didn't create anything in those situations.
Yeah, and I think you have to be a little more creative when it comes to what your tactic is on a quarter or a set piece, where it's, you can't let the opposition know what you're going to do. If you go to the well too many times one way or another, they're going to figure it out and they're going to start defending a little more intentionally. I don't know if it's finding a different player than Marcel Hartel to take the corners. And I'm very much not in the sense of, all right, we shouldn't have Hartel do this, that, or the other on the ball. But that's a phase of the game where things clearly aren't working. And Jerry in the comments said that wind might have played a factor. That's absolutely a fair point. And she had mentioned too, the weather in the stadium inside that ballpark was worse than outside. And so it could have been a conditions kind of scenario where Damet is just seeing what likely will happen, or because I even saw some goal kicks from Berkey where they just didn't seem to have the bite that they usually do, or maybe they were being kicked down or knocked down. I wouldn't be surprised if at least initially they were trying to play these short just because of the conditions and the wind, and they felt a little more like they wanted to control what was happening as opposed to, let the weather handle things. That's always a possibility, and it's definitely at least, if that's not a reason, for sure it's a consideration the fans have to have of why some of these might have happened. But ultimately, you're spot on that the short passes were ineffective, and even if you're not willing to send the ball in the air in those scenarios, something needed to change. And going forward, if weather is a factor, we shouldn't see what we saw last night against NYCFC.
Agree. And yeah, the win could have been a factor, but even if the win is a factor, you don't lose anything if you send a ball to the box and maybe a bad bounce or
see what happens.
Things happen too.
That's fair. Santi, we kind of have to talk about Sergio Cordova now, I think. I don't even know where to go from here other than I found myself a tale of two mindsets during this game, and watching on the replay. At first, I have this idea during the first half that, and let me show some positioning maps here for those watching. This is courtesy of Who Scored. You could see just how absolutely wide Sergio Cordova was for most of the match. Average positioning was outside of Conrad Valem on the right side. There are passing maps that we look at from Opta that put him more inside of Conrad Valem when it comes to passing. But the average positioning is what I want to focus on here, because it was a Salio-esque performance from what he had against the Revs, in the sense that felt like he was trying to be used in that wide right winger role, not an underneath right 10. And early on throughout the game, I kind of saw this and I thought, okay, this is what they're trying to go for. This is the idea that they saw what Valem was able to do. They might like that look, and they know that Cordova can be a hold up kind of a player, so maybe hold it up for Valem, who inverts in a little bit. Okay, I get it a little bit. However, it also doesn't feel like we're maximizing or even taking any advantage of Cordova's skill sets as that target striker in the box. Hold up, and we saw him attempt to hold up play a couple times. I saw him attempt to hold up play off the ball next to Betcher a few times, where the positioning it never seemed to really make sense for where Cordova was on the field. Sometimes he seemed a little lost. He didn't seem like he was working in tandem with other players to work off of the ball well enough. But just in general, as the game progressed, I found myself going more from, all right, this is his first start, we got to see more of Cordova, to, all right, let's be honest with ourselves. We've seen him a few times, 3 times in relief, and now we've seen him first time to start a game. And I can't honestly tell you, Santi, that I've been impressed with any single of those 4 appearances. And I'm not one to say, all right, you should be one and done starting. That's still a fairly small sample size. But also, I'm trying not to speak out of both sides of my mouth here, but also when you have this many opportunities of a 1 start and 3 sub appearances, that's starting to add up a little bit. And you're ineffective on every single one of those. I can't remember a single time in any of these 4 matches where I can say, yeah, he changed a game coming in, or he is that go-to striker, or he's fine on the wing, he's good underneath, he's good at the top, because he's kind of played all over the place, but he hasn't impressed me in any single one of those.
Yeah, the last yesterday and the last game, he played on the right wing, and as I said, that's not his position, and yeah, I'm sure the coaching staff was looking for something there and trying to replicate what Celio did, but it's just not his position. It's just like last year when Simon Betcher was put on that right wing position and it didn't work out. I would like to see him more, even if it's coming in relief at that number 9 position, which is his natural position. But yeah, so far, regardless of the positions he has been put on, no, he hasn't impressed and hasn't contributed to goals or chance creation. So yeah, it's still early, but considering his loan is up in June, the clock is ticking there.
And you always wonder how much that position, and when you have a player like that who's just not succeeding, how much is that actually impacting the game? And I think this image that we're looking at here is looking at game control index. If you're listening to it, it's basically up and down for every team for, I would say, periods of 15 minutes or so. New York City absolutely started the game off on the right foot. They had the first 10 to 15 minutes of control. It swung the other way to St. Louis with a handful of shots, especially around that 10, 11 minute mark. You had some, I would say, good builds into the final third, decent looks, but nothing ever really materialized on net. And it just went back and forth. There were back and forth for long periods of time when you really look at it. And neither team really had that first half control where you felt like either was owning the game. There were a lot of moments of good buildup in the first half that got into the final third. But again, when all is said and done, nothing materialized. You had an Edelman early turnover in the first half that caused some issues. You had a 10-minute goal that was scored, but then ruled offside that Fernandez had strayed a little too far behind the line, and he had for sure. That was an obvious call. I was worried, though, if he hadn't kept drifting further back, that pass actually would have led to a goal, because the spacing at 10 minutes between Baumgartel and Orozco was pretty significant. And I think Fernandez had found a little hole in the back line. Thankfully, he just kept drifting and drifting, and the timing of the pass didn't reach him in time. And then beyond that, 10, 11 minutes, another couple shots for St. Louis. Edelman had another turnover at 21 that Fernandez almost had a shot on goal on as well. That was a good save by Berkey. Marcel Hartl had 2 shots on goal, and he was really the only player to have those 2 shots. I mean, Betcher had a block shot, but there were some looks. But as we'll look at the quality of shots here in a second. But in the first half, nothing really stood out to me as anything new that we haven't seen in us being able to get to the final third, but yet nothing's really created a dangerous opportunity once we're there.
Yeah, but I still a decent half. Kept it scoreless. The defense did well, but yeah, obviously, when you have a game like that you are doing well on defense and you don't create enough on offense, then you risk going into the second half and allowing an early goal like we saw. But I was pleased with that first half. I was like, okay, the guys are doing okay. Maybe the team will get a result. But then the second half starts with that early goal.
Santi, what are my 3 phases of the game that I always say change things for I mean, they will change the game. It's the beginning of the match, right at the very beginning, which, I was worried that 3 minutes in, when NYCFC had that turnover, they almost scored at the beginning. The right before halftime goal is an absolute crusher for morale in the locker room. And then the beginning of the second half, if you allow a goal in the beginning of the second half, arguably the most dangerous time to concede a goal, because you've expelled your tactical time, right? You've had time in the first half to look at everything. You've had your halftime speech. Your adjustments are implemented, and a beginning of the second half goal can just crush all of that, changes everything. So you have to be more nimble, you have to be more adaptive, and you don't have that opportunity to talk to your players about this. And that's what happened with St. Louis. 51 minutes, Hannes Wolf for Maxi Morales. This was not exactly St. Louis shooting themselves in the foot on this, but I do think that there was a level of, okay, St. Louis got a little outside of themselves, and that's what helped cause this. And namely what I alluded to earlier with Chris Durkin. So NYCFC possessing the ball in their defensive half. City begins pressuring in what I would argue is now a prototypical City press. They might not be always out and out attacking the center backs, but they might be waiting for that next pass. When it comes to PPDA and some of these takeaway stats, City is not leading the league in PPDA because they're not out and out pressuring at all areas when folks have the ball building out of the back. They are waiting to create traps, to create overloads in their press, and really force the ball into certain areas of the field to create turnovers. And that's kind of what they were doing here. Simon Betcher wasn't pressuring. You had Durkin stepping up pretty high in the press in the midfield. And so what ended up happening is Keaton Parks gets the ball, plays it off, and then has a well-timed slide tackle on the ball to retain possession. As Keaton Parks does this, it's Chris Durkin who challenges right at the midfield line, right in the circle for the ball, and is just a little bit too late. And Durkin ends up going over top of Keaton Parks and takes himself out of the play. So as Durkin is now on the ground, Baumgartel's back there. You can see him calling for a card or calling for a foul. Hannes Wolf ends up recovering that ball, takes it down in transition now that Durkin has removed himself from the play. And it's Hannes Wolf who plays it off to Maxi Morales, a give and go. And this is the last chance that City has to really make an impact. And it's Dante Polvera who tries to step up to Hannes Wolf. And when Wolf passes off to Maxi Morales, that's to avoid the Dante Polvera challenge. And when Polvera misses that challenge, Maxi Morales has the ball. It's Hannes Wolf who continues his run past Dante Polvera, getting into that space now between Santos and Baumgartel. And that's enough space for Hannes Wolf to end up putting the ball in the net. And it's kind of, in my eyes, the second time in 6 games that we've seen this from Dante Polvera, where it doesn't happen often, but unfortunately, Polvera stepping up and missing a challenge has led to another goal. That's how I saw it. I can tell from the look in your eyes that you might be seeing it differently, but what did you see in this whole goal sequence?
Well, you said it that the team was kind of waiting around to go with the press, and when the play started, there were 5 City players like around the ball in
Yes.
midfield, but not enough press, and then I don't know if it was because of the way Dorkin fell, and maybe the team felt like there was a foul or something, and everybody got passive and was waiting, but nobody followed Hannes Wolf after he passed it to Maxi Morales. And just looking at the replay, I think Hartel hesitated and didn't follow enough. But yeah, I think maybe the fact that Dorkin was down, the team was waiting for maybe something to be called, or didn't reset the way that they were supposed to. And yeah, you can point it to Paul Barra, like, yeah, he tried to win a challenge, but sometimes we also point out like, oh, the guys just kept retreating and let the opposing player shoot. So it's good if you do it, but if you don't like, it's one of those situations. Yeah, sometimes you're gonna get the ball, sometimes you won't. But I wouldn't point it at just Paul Barra, just the way Wolf was able to get in the box without nobody following him.
And I'm glad you said that, because by blaming just Polvera, you take the responsibility off of the players to cover the spaces that he vacates. And that's kind of a hallmark of what I think Yoann Damet is trying to do in this system. It's giving the players the freedom to make these kinds of challenges, to step up and occupy different parts of the field, but knowing that if a player does this, there's a responsibility for those around them to then occupy the spots. Thinking back to the Charlotte game at the very beginning of the season, when Conrad Wallem stepped up on that right wing side, when that one Charlotte goal was allowed, Conrad Wallem steps up, Haziel Roscoe moves wide to cover Wallem's area, and then Daniel Edelman drops back into that right center back role in transition for a brief moment to cover the spot. Now, I think Edelman's actions in there were what they were, but in general, this is what Yoann Damet is trying to instill on his players. And it's difficult in a transition moment like this. I think that's where it's magnified to me, because you could also say that a player like Timo Baumgartel could have moved over to then challenge Hannes Wolf a little more closely immediately as Wolf moves past Dante Polvera. But Baumgartel does kind of what you're describing, drop back a little bit, retaining his space and making sure that he's got his responsibility as central center back locked down in that transition. When you have that space unlocked that Polvera vacates, you need that coverage. So that could be another factor, is making sure that in these transition moments, when a player steps up or makes this is brave in this way, that you have other players who are covering their spots. And things in a perfect world, I think you would have a really cohesive movement where, and this is a split bang bang play. So there's a lot of analysis here about this 2 seconds that happened in this game.
Yeah.
But if Polvera steps up, you almost need that implicit mindset where you have a player do this. Baumgartel knows, okay, I have to take his spot. And at the same time, you have an Orozco, you have a Wallem, you have an Edelman, who are all needing to do certain things because that happens. The problem ultimately is it's in transition and you're not set, and you're playing from behind, like Edelman and Hartl were playing from behind the ball. Durkin was out of the play. So all of these things in a perfect world could have happened. None of them ended up happening. And it's just a lesson learned at the end of the day of how to handle a transition when you have a player who is being brave and probably doing what he should be doing, which is challenging the ball in that scenario. I'm not saying Polvera was wrong to step up and challenge Hannes Wolf, but it just, when things don't work out, you have to have that backup to know that a space is being covered in case you're not successful.
Yeah, it's just a very quick play, and yeah, Sunday morning you can see a lot of things, but it's just fractions of seconds. But yeah, Polvara didn't win that challenge, and yeah, ended up in the goal. But after obviously early goal, and we were talking a little bit about it at the beginning, like some earlier than usual substitutions.
That's right. Quick plug for STL Soccer News. Chris Gebhardt mentioning a comment that he had on Santos turning outside and Timo, the route that Timo's taking. Edelman didn't track back enough on Wolf. Check out his video analysis that he posts on social media because it's a great look at that goal. And if it's not up now, then it's probably up by the time you're listening to this. After that, though, yes, Santi, that was 51. After that, you did get to see some early subs. You have Miguel Perez enter for Chris Durkin at 65. You have Lucas McNaughton and Cedric Toyshirt enter for Daniel Edelman and Sergio Cordova at 71. This was the most interesting sub to me of the entire game, where you actually saw Lucas McNaughton take a left center back role. Dante Polvera moves up to central defensive midfield. First time that we've seen Polvera enter the midfield for St. Louis and really test the city depth. For the first time, we see Durkin and Edelman exit the game this early like that. And we see, well, I think it's the first time all season that they've actually both exited the game at the same time, or in the same game. And so because of that, with no Leuven, no Ostrak, you see what the depth in central midfield looks like. And it is leveraging the center back depth of Lucas McNaughton with Mbake on the bench available to move Dante Polvera up to midfield. And I thought Polvera did fine, and it was a nice midfield look. He had a couple moments of being able to clear the ball, but mostly I liked his positioning. He stayed deep in front of that line when they were back against the ball. I think that just speaks to his experience at central defensive midfield. So I was heartened by the fact that Damet was willing to put Polvera there, as opposed to maybe play a player out of position or bring somebody in with less experience in the midfield. You've got Polvera, you've got depth at the center back position. Why not leverage them both in a situation like this? And he did. That was great to see. And then at 79 and 80, Joyner and McSorley come in for Santos and Betcher. More like for like subs. At least in the run of play, there was some craziness that happened when we were seeking a goal very late in the game. But this is, like we said earlier, the first time that Damet has really subbed out a player before 70 when they're not a fitness or injury concern. We assume that's the case for Durkin. But what did you make of all these subs and the fact that Damet utilized all of his subs in this game, which hasn't always been the case?
Yeah, that was a surprise, especially he finished the subs at the 80th minute, and previous games, there have been subs late in the game, close to stoppage time. But I was pleased with the job that all the subs did. Obviously, McNaughton was a key piece on the equalizer. Also, McSorley, but I think all the subs did a good job. Even Miggy that came in early. I think it was because of Dorkin's yellow card. It was more like, okay, we need to take him out to make sure he doesn't get a red card. And then we're in that situation where we're down a man and we won't be able to get that equalizer. But I think the guys that came in did a good job, didn't make any mistakes. Miggy even had a couple of times where he was involved in the attack. One great pass to Marcel Hardel, and then also he had a shot on goal, but he didn't have a good angle. But I think he did a good job, and I was impressed with what McNaughton did. And obviously, the last 20 minutes, tactics go out the window. But not only he had that cross, he also had a ball in the box, a header that he gave to Polvara. That would have been a great goal, but he shot it a little high. But I was impressed with what I saw from McNaughton too.
That was in stoppage as well, just a few minutes. And that speaks to the craziness that happened in stoppage time. That Hartle free kick from deep around 90+3 to McNaughton far post, headed it back, kept it alive for Dante Polvera, who just sent it right over the crossbar. Couldn't quite get the ball in the net at 90+3. 90+5 is where things really escalated for City. Fernandez had a breakaway that Orozco chased down. Orozco, McNaughton, and Berkey ended up being the difference between Fernandez getting that breakaway opportunity and a goal. I thought the positioning, the speed of Orozco was fantastic in that moment to catch up to Fernandez, but then the spacing and the positioning of Orozco and McNaughton to make sure that they took away any far post opportunity, and it was more of a narrow 1v1 against Berkey. And then Berkey, obviously, you rely on him to make that save, and he did. That was great. it was right after that next possession, that next play immediately after that City played it up and ended up getting the ball into the left area. And this is where I was saying tactics are gone. You're not looking to break down NYCFC to get this equalizer. You are purposefully creating this set piece opportunity in the run of play where you have Conrad Vollum over on the left wing back side. Makai Joyner's in the box in the right channel. City is clearly setting up in between the back line and the midfield in the box of NYCFC, clearly setting up for a set piece or a free kick or a cross, whatever you want to call it. And it was McNaughton that ended up pulling it back, getting it in behind the line of NYCFC on a very quick cross over the middle. City had 5 players between the back line and the midfield at that time, including Brendan McSorley. And it was McSorley who, upon the ball being kicked while it was in the air, released, got in behind the back line, and just took everybody by surprise. The back line was caught on their heels, and McSorley had a perfectly timed header to pull one back for St. Louis. This was the drive, determination, and fight that we wanted to see, and it was a good tactical look to create something in this manner, and a great touch from both Lucas McNaughton and Brendan McSorley.
That was a great move by McSorley, and I'm sure this is something the team has worked on in training. He recognized the moment and made the run and surprised everybody. And not only he was at the right place, but he also was able to get a good header and away from Matt Freese to get the equalizer. So I really like the way he moved, but I think he recognized the situation right away and made the move.
And because of that, Brendan McSorley ends up as the player of the match, the man of the match on this one, with Lucas McNaughton, I think, getting a lot of praise for his quality, not just on that pass, but leading up to the goal. He had good defensive work. He had nice touches. His expected assists were good. Second career MLS assist for Lucas McNaughton. Third career MLS goal by Brendan McSorley. City ends this match now in a better position than what they were going into it, I think, now taking a point on the road. So that's what you hope in MLS ultimately. You win your home games, you take a point on the road, and you build from that. Santi, any other final thoughts before we get out of here on this match? We talked about a lot of our big picture thoughts at the beginning, but I think this is definitely, like Damet said, something to build off of, a confidence booster, knowing you can continue coming back, but at the same time, you still have a lot of things that need fixing in the attack.
Yeah, just take the point, and yeah, a lot of things to improve. And even Damet said it on the press conference. Yeah, I know it wasn't the best game and we have to work on a lot of things, but trying to work on things after a good result is better than be like down and demotivated just because you didn't get a result at the end. So yeah, just take the point and continue working.
And they take the point and they head to Dallas, Frisco, Texas, to be specific. Next week, City faces FC Dallas, who are fresh off a 4-0 slobber knocker against DC United. And we have all of the matches complete now because of the Easter holiday. City, after 6 match days, sits tied 12th with the LA Galaxy on 5 points, still with a -3 goal differential. But this important point keeps us just 3 points out of a 9th place playoff spot after all that we've been through so far. And as we continue to grow, though, even at this, the top 7 teams are kind of starting to separate themselves, including FC Dallas. FC Dallas and San Diego are tied for 6th right now on 11 points, 6 points higher than St. Louis after 6 weeks. NYCFC also has 11 points, if that gives you any context. And they're second in the East. So this Western Conference is really difficult to start this season. And City will have a full week of training. They'll head to Frisco next week for the second of 3 straight away matches against a fairly difficult FC Dallas team. Though, as we know from facing the New England Revolution, you can't really judge a team that has this massive performance in the week prior to say, oh, they're now a different caliber team as we face them. So we'll preview FC Dallas later this week. Santi, any final thoughts on MLS action or City after this week?
So something to note, the 6 opponents City has played so far, all of them are in playoff positions right now. So that tells something about the schedules. Even New England, with that win yesterday, they put themselves in 9th position, which qualifies them for that playing game.
I'm glad you mentioned that. That's probably a good ending, is a reminder of just how difficult the schedule has been. Last time I checked, we were top 3 in strength of schedule, and I think it just got worse after this season, or at least stronger in who we've faced. definitely good to note as we continue facing an FC Dallas team, a Seattle team upcoming that are in playoff positions themselves. We have now 13 league matches left before the World Cup break. After that, our schedule from a competition wise gets a little easier, even though it's a little more congested. So this is a good match to take away, a good point to steal from NYCFC, knowing the level of competition, knowing the growth that this team has been under. A lot of positives going into Dallas next week. And I think there's a lot of good takeaways from City to build off of, to continue building off of. Quality in the attack continues to be an issue, but everything else is starting to get a lot better. And you're seeing some more consistency and confidence from the players after a win, or after a draw, rather, that somewhat felt like a win, or at least it felt like a good draw at the very least. But that's it for us on Flyover Footy. A fallout look at a 1-1 draw against NYCFC at City Field in New York. City's first trip to New York City ends with a draw and a point. For Santiago Beltran, my name is Matt Baker. If you're listening to us on the Easter holiday, have a good holiday. If you're listening to us after, hopefully you've had a good weekend, and we'll talk to you later.
Happy Easter. Vamos City.
All right, Santi. Appreciate it. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in to us early on Easter. Have a great rest of the day, and we'll talk to you later.
Thanks, everyone.